I've been staring at the map of western Essos too long, but I think I've finally made some sense of the Dothraki. How is this group, with no armor, no siege weapons, the ones to conquer so much? To understand the world as it is, we need to go back to the beginning. On screen is a map of the western half of Essos in George R. R. Martin's world, and I apologize up front for butchering the pronunciation of the various cultures in that world. Gis was one of the early powers in that region. They spread up and down the coast, establishing many cities that appear in the book. There are even more Griskari cities detailed in the world book and maps. There are 3 cities on the map that do not specify a country of origin or an ethnicity, but given their location and age, they were likely part of the Empire of Gis. I speculate that these cities predate the Doom of Valyria because there are trade routes connecting these cities to cities destroyed just after the Doom by the Dothraki, as we'll get to later. On screen is the Empire of Gis at the height of their power, plus there were a couple more colonies just south of this map on the northern coast of Suthros. The Griskari neighbor to the north was the Kingdom of Sarnor. These were mostly independent city-states, but Sarnath held the High King. Far up north were a couple colonies from the island nation of Ibn, which is located a bit further off the map to the north. To the east was the Patriarchy of Hirkun that was situated on the other side of the Bone Mountains in the lands east of this map, but they held a few cities within range, including 2 on the Griskari side of the mountains. To the southeast were the city-states of the Kathi people, who were mostly pushed into less hospitable areas by the other groups of this area. The greatest threat to the Empire of Gis was to their west, where dragons were tamed in the peninsula of Valyria. The Valyrian freehold spread across their peninsula. Sorry for using a post-Doom map, but this video will carry through past the Doom to the time of the book and show, and it was just easiest to make this video with one map throughout. I made some guesses on which border towns belonged to the Valyrians versus the Griskari, based on the name and road placement, but as you can see, these 2 powers are butting against each other. They fought 5 wars, and in the last one, the Valyrians completely destroyed the capital of Gis. After that, all remaining Griskari cities became under the control of the Valyrian freehold, one larger Valyrian empire. With Gis defeated, the Valyrians turned their attention to the west. The Rhoynar were settled all along the river and initially welcomed the Valyrian newcomers, who mostly stuck to lands away from the Rhoynar territory. The Valyrians took land from the Andals in the north and likely other groups in the southwest. This caused the great migration of Andals to Westeros. The Valyrian colonies had varying levels of independence. All except Braavos held loyalty to Valyria. Braavos was founded in secret by escaped slaves that wanted nothing to do with Valyria. The founding stories of the other cities varied. Some were military outposts, some beach resorts, some communes established by religious fanatics. As those colonies grew, they eventually had colonies of their own. Cooperative trade between the Valyrians and the Rhoynar turned into competition over resources that led to multiple wars. Eventually, the Rhoynar were driven off and left en masse to avoid enslavement. This led the Rhoynar on a long journey that eventually ended in Dorne of Westeros. The Valyrians are a group that continually seek to expand and enslave. First the Griskari, then the Andals, then the Rhoynar. Now who's next? It's possible their next conflict will be with the Kingdom of Sarnor, but the Sarnori are their oldest allies. The Kingdom of Sarnor allied with the Valyrians multiple times in their wars against the Griskari. The Kathi could be targets, but they were another ally with established trade routes between their cities and Valyrian-controlled ones. Maybe Driftmark and Dragonstone, off this map to the west, were stepping stones for their invasion into Westeros. My best guess is their next target was the Dothraki. The Dothraki in the northeast border Valyrian-controlled cities. As a nomadic group, they would be difficult to find and capture. Dragon Riders make it easier to scout them out, but wanting to enslave, not burn them, there's only so much a Dragon Rider can do without an army. Running from the Valyrians is likely how the Dothraki became such a militant society. Whatever the Valyrians' next step would have been, it was cancelled by the Doom of Valyria. Their capital, all cities on the peninsula, and the majority of their dragons were instantly wiped out. A large tidal wave destroyed 2 cities on a nearby island. All surviving Valyrian cities became independent city-states overnight. And this is where the Dothraki thrive. They go from hunted to one of the most powerful fighters in the area. Everyone else was disorganized and split up. The Valyrian cities turned on each other, trying to assert supremacy. Valyrian soldiers were likely over-reliant on dragon riders in the past, and not able to fight well without them. The Sarnorian Cathai had a peaceful border with Valyria for a millennium. If someone else attacked, they could always call on their Valyrian neighbors for help. And if the Valyrian attacked, well, no amount of preparation would have saved them from those dragons, so what's the point? There was no reason for them to have a trained army ready. They were utterly unprepared for a world without the Valyrians. Their city-state structure made things even worse, as they were slow to react and unite when the first few cities fell. It's not stated in what order the Dothraki sacked different cities, but I think the 3 Griscari cities to their south were the first target. Those are the Valyrian cities that would have been the base of operations for attacks on the Dothraki, and revenge is sweet. It is stated the first Sarnori city to fall was Sathar. The survivors were sold as slaves to Hazdan Mo. A few decades after that, Hazdan Mo fell to the Dothraki. The Dothraki spread in all directions, conquering city after city from all neighboring cultures. But how and why did they do this? The how is not well developed in the book and show. They don't seem equipped to take on a city with walls, and their depictions seem to rely more on stereotypes than actual real-world nomadic cultures. But it's established canon that they did destroy many cities. So let's move past the how to why. I think it was Meereen. The largest of the slave cities is on the edge of the Dothraki Sea. Valyria used to supply them with slaves, and that demand remained when Valyria fell. Now the Dothraki are on the constant lookout for slaves to deliver to Meereen, who in turn supplies them with their swords. Real-world historical nomadic groups primarily used bows and later guns. They weren't mining metals to make swords and stationary forges. Creating their swords had to be done in Meereen and the other slave cities, then traded to the Dothraki for slaves. If you look at the conquered cities, they spread out in all directions from Meereen. There are 3 cities in Lhazar that don't seem like they should be standing. They are smaller, not major centers like Meereen, Yunkai, and Astapor. They are in Lhazar. The Dothraki refer to the Lhazareen with contempt as lamb men. Why would they let Lhazareen cities stand, and how could the Lhazareen fight them off? I think the answer is those aren't Lhazareen cities, but Griscari cities. Specifically, satellites of Meereen that serve as the breadbasket for Meereen. Meereen, in addition to buying their safety for trading with the Dothraki, also bought the safety of their 3 satellite towns. The Lhazareen are a nomadic people who travel between Griscari towns in the Lhazar region. The Lhazar are shepherds and would need to continually move so that their sheep herds do not overgraze any area. They trade with the Griscari, but are not offered specific protection by the Griscari. Still, the Dothraki know to leave those 3 towns alone, so those areas are safer than most to graze. And the Dothraki Sea is so vast, and so sparsely populated, that the probability of running into a Dothraki group remains quite small, as long as they stay away from vast Dothrak, where multiple Dothraki Khalasars regularly converge. That's how the Lhazareen survived despite being so close to the Dothraki. I suspect the nomadic Lhazareen and nomadic Dothraki were long ago one people. If the split occurred before the Doom, then it was likely the Valyrians that caused it. The Lhazareen were the ones allowed to graze on Valyrian land in peace, while the Dothraki were the ones hunted and pushed ever further north. The Dothraki grew resentful of the preferential treatment the Lhazareen received, and thus hated that group above all others. If the split occurred after the Doom, then it was likely a moral split over slavery. The Dothraki had a bone to pick and were ready to oppress their former oppressors, whereas the Lhazareen, having once been hunted, were unwilling to do that to others. Maybe the Dothraki once gave their Lhazareen cousins preferential treatment, but centuries later, they are the easiest remaining target. The Dothraki may be a victim of their own success. They conquered so much that the remaining cities are too far or too well defended for them to conquer. Qohor stopped their attack with an army of Unsullied. Since then, whatever siege technology the Dothraki had has been lost through lack of use. Their land is so vast that there is no worry of overgrazing, so the routes need not to be organized or coordinated. They wandered aimlessly across the Dothraki Sea, looking for slaves to deliver to Meereen. The Lhazareen are the easiest remaining target, but encounters with them are random and rare, and thus the most frequent target is each other. Khalasar attacking Khalasar. This is how the Dothraki became who we see in the show.